Okay, everybody, thank you for joining me. So today I'm going to analyze a 1940s jumpsuit and talk a bit about the basic drafting principles behind it, but also about jumpsuits in general, and see how you could draft your own. If you're my patron, of course, that's a drafting inspiration for this month. So we're going to do a full draft tutorial on that beautiful wrap over, which makes this quite special. So it's like a wrap dress, but on a jumpsuit, so quite unusual. And there's also some contemporary pattern versions you can do if you don't like drafting, if you prefer just sewing, and I'm going to share them with you too. And if you haven't watched my channel before, I think most of you have who are watching live. My name is Charlotta. This is the School of Pattern Cutting. I'm a fashion designer, pattern cutter, and teacher. But most of all, I love vintage fashion, and I also love helping you learn to draft your own wardrobe. So welcome, everybody. And Svetlana is just saying she made her vintage shawl collar top this morning. I'd love to see that. That's fantastic. And hello, Cindy, and I'm glad you can hear me now, Heather. So I'd love to hear from you. I know Jen is planning on making a jumpsuit, probably not this one, a different one. But I'd love to know if any of you are planning to making jumpsuits this season, and what type. And this one works like a wrap dress, so it's a bit like your classic wrap dress from that period, but with a pair of trousers attached. Oh, I haven't got it on my iPad. There's also a slightly more sophisticated way of doing it, where instead of a wrap, you actually have a pleat, which I love doing. It's a very sort of clever, very chic drape technique. So I'm going to look at that at some point. But for now, we're going to look at this one. And what I love about it, that it has that sort of wrap detail. So it's a little bit Claire McCardle, but if you also think about DVF, that sort of, you can really make this quite stylish. You can make it really wearable. You could make it quite glamorous, whatever you prefer. And this is very 1940s. So I've got a real photo, and I have to now confess, I'm not a fan of how it looks in the real photo. So this is from Kate found this for me. It's from an American 1940s how to basically dress while you're helping with war effort publication. And in there, it's not the best look, is it? But I think that's a great thing about drafting your own. You can style it however you want to. And there's lots of appreciation for it in the chat. So Jen loves it. And Omatayo wants to make one without waist seam. Casual comfy. That's quite true. It's always, do you have waist seams or not? This one, let me just check. This one actually hasn't waist seam. So that's a great thing that you can keep it more casual, or you can wear it with a belt or tie to style it up. And there's also a slightly different one that you share with you, which I actually think it must be very similar, but I quite like. This looks like it's a little bit tighter. This looks a bit more stylish even. You agree? And you can also see the details a bit better, but I think it's very, very similar. Just check. Oh, is it even the same one? Yes, it is the same one. There you go. I'm just blind. So it's just differently styled. So I'm actually going to have a look at this one because you can see the details better. So let's have a look about, I already did a little drafting, well, not a little, it was I think in an hour, draft analysis for jumpsuits in general, and I will fit my jumpsuit tomorrow. I was going to do it today, but time got in my hand. But I talked a bit more about the principles, but this jumpsuits, there's also a live with Trisha on Instagram. Jumpsuits, you always need more height on your bodice because instead of just having a trouser and a separate shirt, that if you sit down or bent over, it can separate and your shirt will become untucked to give you extra move, extra space to move. With a jumpsuit, of course, everything is attached. So, but Trisha said she actually takes her whole movement, her whole measurement from your top of your center front all the way down in between your legs, and then all the way back again to your neck at the center back, just to know which length you need. And you can do that sitting down as well, because most of us, our torso, I don't actually know the science about it. I should probably find out. If you sit down, it's basically a bit longer. Somehow. It has to do with the angle, probably. Especially at the back. You don't want it to be too tight at the back. So if you're sitting down, it becomes longer in the back. And Heather agrees that it's not a great fit on her on the photo. So I think I actually prefer this illustration where it's nice and fitted. And I think when you make your own, you can really play around with the fit of it. So let's have a look at it. And Jen said, yes, I am wearing my dress finally after, I think it's nearly 2 years. I'm actually not sure. I am wearing my dress, and I quite like it with layers underneath, rather than summer. So, and finally I'm wearing something me made, because normally I make these tutorials and I'm completely not dressed by myself. So let's go onto the table and have a look. So what I would suggest for this style is, if you have a relaxed bodice block, start with that. If you haven't got a relaxed bodice block, you can of course use mine. There's a YouTube tutorial for that. I will put that in the comments. So the best thing is to use your relaxed bodice. If you haven't got your own block, then use a commercial pattern, which again, you know, like a slim fit shirt. So not completely oversized, because I think this is quite, it's not oversized, it's semi-fitted. So the shoulders are still normal. It has some ease. It's basically straight, and they've added extra gathers and stuff. So it's like the yoke top from a vintage masterclass, if you've done that. Very similar design. So you've got some ease, but it's not completely oversized. So go for that. So I'm just seeing, I hope it looks slightly pixelated, so I hope it looks okay for you. So you're going to start with that. And then again, with the trousers, if you have your trouser block, I would add a bit of ease. So can you see it's got these sort of creases there, which you could use as pleats. And then the back, again, it has creases, which probably would be your dart. So instead of a back dart, you have creases. But I would also say, whenever you do a jumpsuit, you don't want the skin tight. So your bodice block is quite skin tight. So I would make it slightly wider. So probably add, I actually didn't add enough. I would probably add at least 5 centimeters or 2 inches to a whole front, and the same to the back, so around 10 centimeters or 4 inches extra, just so it's not skin tight. Or if you have a commercial pattern for a sort of, again, not too fitted trousers, so use that. So that's what you start off with. And I think it's sort of where you, even if it's slightly too big on your first twirl, you can pinch it out a bit and fit it a bit more. But if it's too tight, everything will pull. You can do this really loose trousers, but these are more like a straight commercial trouser. Or there's lots of really nice pleated commercial trousers at the moment, patterns. So you can use that as well. But then what basically happens, you have your, sorry, I'm just looking whether it's a proper collar or whether it's a fake collar. Oh, it's a fake collar, so I'm happy. So this is basically the collar. It looks like it's a really clever, nicely made, tailored work collar, but it's a shawl collar. So it's a cheats version of a collar. And why I know it, because not with a tailored collar, you've got a seam line here, so you haven't got that. And also because I'm cheating, and I found an old commercial pattern envelope, and you can actually see the collar is attached there. I think so. Actually, they might have done the collar as a separate piece, but you can either. So you can either use your short collar drafting method, and it just be a slightly softer feel, because of course with a tailored collar, the whole thing is by having a seam here is you can really fit the top collar, and put a banana collar in and stuff and get really fitted. So short collar won't be super fitted, but it will work. And what they've actually done is a sort of very home dressmaker version of doing it, which is a separate one. So you can use the same method as a short collar, but you have it as a separate piece, which of course saves fabric, because you can fit in that sort of slightly curved collar somewhere else on your fabric. And because it's separate from your body, you can make it a bit more fitted, because the short collar, of course, you can only fit the back neck, you can't fit the top front. So that's quite good by separate. It's also much easier to stitch, because with a short collar, like we just said earlier, Svetlin said she just finished the vintage short collar. That corner is always really tricky to stitch, and you don't want it can fray and stuff. So for something like that, which had to be really quite robust, you had to be varied to work, you didn't want to have a weak corner there. So using a separate collar for that reason as well, you can just stitch it on. Of course, if it frays or got dirty, you could also take it off and replace it with like a statement colored collar. So for that purpose, there's lots of reasons why you might use different collars, both historically and now. So ease of putting it on, practicality, strength of construction, and fitting as well. So they have gone for a separate one, which works fine. You have to be a little bit careful. Basically, where it attaches down here, you can get quite a lot of bulk of fabric. So you might have to snip bits of it, and you need definitely a facing, otherwise it sort of it won't sit very nice. But yes, so a different color than normal. Okay, so if we start with the collar, that's actually a separate collar in this case. But of course, you are the designer, so it's up to you. So they actually got, if I draw it in the red, so that's our back neck, and it's actually attached to your back neck. So the collar looks like this, and that's your shoulder notch, and that's the back, and that's the front. So it's like you can draft it like a short collar, and then you just chop it off on your line. And then we've got our yoke. So you just add a new seam, and you add however much ease you want. So if you haven't got a lax bodice block, you can actually convert your darts into gathers. Or if you've done the vintage masterclass, you can do the yoke top as well. And then you can see the fit. You've got all these creases here. So I actually think I'm gonna draw it flat rather than cinched in. So I think the fit is actually fairly straight, because then, and it's one piece, because you can see there's no seam there. So that's good for omotayo, because that's relaxed. And then you can see this would be your waist dart, probably so you can sort of see your single waist dart becomes these two pleats here. So it's split into two and becomes stiff. And again, your bust dart sort of, if you have one, goes into gathers up there. Using your relaxed bodice block, and then I would actually add a slash line. So that would give you a slightly more relaxed, boxier fit, which I think this might be, but you can achieve it both ways. But at the same time, we also need to, sorry, just getting my blocks so I can show you. At the same time, you also need to sort of straighten your side seam. So that will add a little bit of ease, but will keep it quite fitted up here. So if you're using a relaxed bodice block, you can literally add a slash and spread to give you the gathers up here and a bit more pleats at the base. And that will also give you a bit of extra ease, so it's more comfortable to wear. And then we have this sort of wrap front, which goes down and then becomes part of the trousers. It has two on both sides. It probably has, you think, actually no, only on this side it's got like a keyhole entry, so you could just do a buttonhole, or you could actually do it with a welt. It's up to you, but you basically need an opening there so your wrap can go through it. So then we just get our trousers, which are completely they're completely straight. But what they have, if I zoom in, they've got a really nice detail. Can you see this? It's got a little, in the inner side seam, it's got a little buckle, and then it's got a button around here, and then you can basically buckle it together, so it becomes fitted, so you can ride your bike or change your silhouette or wherever you want to. Also, of course, if you're wearing it with boots on top, it will tuck into your boots. So I got lots of really clever details. And if the arms are quite straight, this is 1940s, so that would have had a shoulder pad. If I'm going to look at the flat pattern just out of interest. Yeah, can you see it's got quite a high sleeve still. Which gives you sort of, so it's probably got quite a wide sleeve, but it's quite a high sleeve head to accommodate shoulder pads if you want them. Of course, that's up to you. You don't have to do it. So you can use a normal sleeve. You could, of course, you can actually see their sleeve has two tiny darts there to basically create room for that shoulder pad. That would also be a really nice detail. So if you want a slightly, if you like the sort of big sleeve look of a puffed sleeve, but it's a bit too fluffy for you, by adding little pleats or little darts instead of puff of gathers, you still get the same look, but it's a bit more restrained. And you can see that sort of on the back, it corresponds. So again, it's got two little darts or tucks. And then at the back, it's got a really low yoke. So at the front, we got a high yoke. At the back, it's got a lower yoke. What's quite interesting, the yoke is cut on one piece, which means your straight of grain has to be on the center back, which means this actually becomes slightly off grain. Because, can you see? So if that's my straight of grain, this is sort of slightly off grain, but that should be fine. It's always whenever you basically replace the shoulder seam with a yoke, you have to sort of think about where you want your straight of grain to be. So for example, with men's shirts, when they have the shoulder seam just brought forward a tiny bit, they quite often actually have a seam at the back, and then the back is sometimes on bias on the yoke. So you actually, for men, if you think about with a men's shirt, you basically move the shoulder seam slightly forward, so you don't have all your seams right at the top where your the back would sit, or a rucksack or whatever. So by moving it slightly forward, you just got 2 layers at the top. So less bulk, but also less weaknesses from the seam. And then at the back, you got your yoke. But then if you think about movement, and especially, well, both women and men, but with men and what sort of manual tasks they would have done in Victorian times in their shirts or whatever. But making on the bias just means you have more comfort. So by putting this on the straight of grain, it's easier to construct because it's just one piece. So this again is utility wear, ration, coupons, not a lot of fabric. So it probably saves you a bit of fabric because you're not having a bias line where you have to have your piece at a weird angle. But of course it means it's quite strong around the shoulder section. But it doesn't give you as much movement. So if you want something with quite a lot of movement, you could actually add the bias seam. Actually, let me check. I've got some men's shirts. So they had the bias, so that I completely no. I'm going to put down here. So this is just a classic London shirt, and can you see on the back yoke it's got the bias there, and then the front yoke is actually completely of a straight of grain. So what you basically get is in the shoulder section here where you want the fabric at its toughest. So if you have a seam up here, you got more bulk, and also it can rip. It can be a weak point. So by having a straight of grain there, you have really strong fabric for whatever you want to do. And then on the back, you got your bias. So you got the movement for your shoulders and arms. So they can play the bit. It might have been, it's quite a box. I think that it's not that fitted. So it makes it quite strong, but you could change it to a more classic shirting style to get that movement. So you always have to think, what am I going to do? Am I somebody who really likes that sort of movement and flexibility? Or am I somebody who doesn't need it? And Astrid just commented, that's very interesting. Brooks Brother is always straight of grain for the back yoke. So that's really fascinating. Brooks Brother is one of the most famous sort of American menswear, and probably one of the most famous shirt people. Sorry, I'm sort of looking down. I've got a massive pile on my floor of stuff I'm taking apart and repurposing. So I will quickly check. I hope this isn't too boring. So I have got a Swedish shirt, and that's straight of grain on the yoke, but it's got a very narrow yoke. I've got an English Horse and Curtis, so that's German Street. The German Street is, if you're British or if you're interested, in British sort of menswear, several rows where you have your suits made, and German Street is shirt makers. So that's sort of a classic British shirt. And then I've got some Uniqlo, and Uniqlo again is straight of grain. I've got another Uniqlo, but linen, that's straight of grain, and I've got a Boss, which is straight of grain as well. So it seems to be it's only the British who do the bias. So actually, I'd love to know if you can tag me with Instagram or something. If you have any old shirts, because I know Astrid has a whole bag of Brooks Brothers. They're all straight of grain. I just imagined the whole thing about bias, although you have some more bias as well. But of course, it's like with anything, with drafting, sewing, there isn't one. Obviously, most of them, there isn't one clear, perfect method, because all of us over centuries in different countries have developed ways which work fine, and it's the same as anything else. There's different motors, different cars, different engines, and they all work. See, it's like CDs and Blu-rays; they both work. But it's basically what, if you think about what you want, you want the straight of grain. What'd be interesting, Astrid, is whether the yoke is quite narrow. So when you have the bias on the back yoke and have a deep yoke, it makes sense because it goes really low. And a lot of the ones which are on the straight of grain seem to have a narrower yoke, which is probably just about strengthening that shoulder section. I probably have now talked far too long about yoke, so I hope I haven't lost you all. And Sharon says it's maybe also because some of the brands are more formal. That could be as well, maybe about movement versus, formality, like if you have a suit or something. And Heather says, super interesting, so thank God I didn't lose you. The bias might also increase comfort for a more rounded upper back. And that's completely true. So it's, most of us sit on a table and on the computer formal times we've been writing. So if you have a bit of extra. And my bias yoke shirt has a really deep yoke. So that would make complete sense that you're literally going down to probably down here, halfway your armhole, and that would ensure that instead of being really strong, you have that bit of movement. There you go. You can do it how you want it and also what you want to achieve. So this is straight of grain on my 1940s top. It's probably not that deep. That actually is probably quite deep, but what they have done then instead is added more pleats. So, and now this is quite interesting. So it depends, like I'm somebody who wants to really move constantly, and I've got a very similar dress like that with a yoke, and then it's got a really deep pleat. And what actually has happened for me is that the pleat is to stitch down a bit, and that has actually ripped because I'm somebody who moves a lot. So this probably is quite loose, so it works. And somebody, Michelle says, it's interesting that the forward yoke has a purpose. My son is always asking for my ability to move in his well-fitted dress shirts, so I'm going to try the bias yoke. Oh, that's fantastic. I'd love to know what your son thinks, Michelle, whether he thinks it helps. But I think a lot of these I find menswear quite fascinating because as women, the fashion constantly changes. Like, if you think about how much our fashion has changed from even 1910, like Edwardian's time, to now, like in 100 years, it's unrecognizable. But for men, of course, now it's changed for a lot as well. But the basic of men's shirts is still very similar. So they have a lot of it has gone more into fits and different fits and slightly tinkering with everything. So at the moment, men's shirts are quite fitted, so they haven't got much movement, which is why we had to add stretch and stuff. So if you look at different periods and how for different functions they added different styles, you can actually learn a lot about fitting your own clothes, even if you don't wear men's shirts. So let's have a look at the jumpsuit. Maybe we should do a whole analysis of men's shirts and how we can use them. I've got some beautiful a whole book about smocking. It's all about the work shirt and why you have smocking. It's quite fascinating. I'll be looking at 1940s jumpsuits today. So the back again, what's quite interesting is we got a little bit, it's probably, it's only, it's not that much east, because if you look at it, that looks for me, that's probably about 5 centimeters. So it's probably about 5 extra in there and 5 extra centimeters in most in there. So it's 10 centimeter extra movement. And Michelle just said, yes, please, men's shirts. So let me know if anybody else is interested, and we can make some men's shirt stuff. And then the back, I'm just quickly going to check. I will imagine it's completely straight. And you can actually see, sometimes I never use commercial patterns, but what I find quite interesting, if you look at vintage stuff, which has a really specific look, is if you look at how the pattern pieces look, you can see this is actually completely straight. So the front has a bit of shaping, but the back piece is zero shaping with a bit of a dart here. But the side seam is completely straight. And I'm not sure what drafted like that, because I think that's for fabric usage. So that could be put on your selvage and you literally waste nothing. But I think for most of us, if you're curvy, if you have a waist and a hip and a bum, it'd be a bit too straight. So I would probably do slightly shaping. But what they've done is they have no waist seam, but instead they put in the center back seam all the way down. So that's what means it's really good fabric usage. So I would probably keep my waist above, my bodice above the waist quite straight, same as the front. So square it out. So this is your imaginary. That's your natural waist. And then they've done it completely straight, but I would probably add, well, you have to look at how your blocks look like. But I know with my block, I have some shaping both at the front and the back. It's not completely straight. And that's, of course, what's great about that you know your body really well. So you can work out that if you see a vintage pattern and it's quite a good sort of helps you puzzle out things, you can actually think, ooh, you don't have to follow the pattern. If you buy a commercial pattern, you sort of don't know which block they started from. But if you know your body and your blocks fits you, you can actually look at that and say, that will never work for me. So I need to add a bit of shaping just to fit me and my shape. Because what they've basically done is they've replaced, again, the darts at the back and the darts at the bodice and the back of the trousers have both been moved into pleating. But that works well if you're quite straight. But if you are more curvy, I would probably maybe keep some of the side seam shaping. I wouldn't straighten it out completely. I think it'd be too wide. And also, I'm actually on mine, I'm keeping some of my trouser, the dart shaping on the bum, just because I don't want a completely elasticated. So they've got, if you have got a curvier bottom, I think keeping some of the darting for shaping and then using some of it for ease, for pleats, for gathering works better, for elasticating. It's up to you, but I sort of like to have a hybrid where I keep some shaping, so it gives you slightly better silhouette. And then some of it I will transform into elastication for comfort. So that's a sort of over silhouette. So basically, you can see we're using our bodice block or our commercial slim shirt and then our trouser block, and we're just lining it up. And of course, they might not completely join up, so you might have something which is slightly bigger or smaller, and that's where you sort of patchwork them together by either adding a bit at the top or the bottom. Like I said, I would add to trouser block 10 centimeters, so that might sort of correspond to your dart plus straightening it. It's a sort of area and drafting where is normally you say cut and slash and everything be fine. With something like that, you probably do a little bit of bodging and puzzling it all together. And I would also, as we said, you need to have from your sort of collarbone at the front and in between your legs and then up again to here. That needs to be long enough, both if you're sitting down and standing up. So I added 10 centimeters in mine, and that actually wasn't quite enough if I'm sort of crouching down. So that's where you have to basically add extra. And I added, if you have sort of a high waist, because that's sort of, you have a bit extra above, because when it's cinched, when it's sort of tied up, you've got a bit. You see, you have a little bit of extra above, and then a lot of the extra length probably comes to your trousers. So I would probably maybe do 2/3 from your trousers and 1/3 from above, which means that if you're standing, you have a dropped crotch a bit. So you got a little bit of sort of extra length at the top, which sort of means you actually get quite a nice drape. And actually, you could probably do half to start with, and then you can always sort of, when you put it on, you would actually work out where it sits. So if you cinch it in with a tie, where is it actually comfortable, and there would it work. So it's quite often you have, if you ever worn jumpsuits or made one, they quite often have a little bit of dropped crotch. That's for the more relaxed styles. If you want a really fitted style, you can actually do normal crotch, and then it gets lots of shaping, which means you have a really low zip at the front as well, but which also mostly means you need a bit of stretch. If you think about sort of 1990s denim super fitted jumpsuits, they probably have a lot of stretch, but you also probably wouldn't sit down that relaxed on them. They're more for standing. But that's the sort of starting point where you use your blocks. You basically add lots of extra ease. And then, of course, you create your wrap as well. And there's different ways of putting it together. So actually, I'm going to show you quickly. If you're not if you might have seen on my Instagram, Tremaine Soul Style, she made a really beautiful contemporary, very similar wrap jumpsuit. It's a bit different. I show you, she shared the photo. So this is the original. And this actually, I think, has the pleat I really love. So you can make it as a dress or as a jumpsuit. But can you see here? So this actually has a pleat which goes down into the leg. So hers is more like, it's similar at the top, but then it becomes a pleat. And I really like that method. So I quite like to do that on Patreon if people are interested. But for this one, which is the more original one, this is a pure wrap style. So it's like a Claire McCardle. It's the same method. You can use, you could actually use some of the methods you used for the wrap dress as well, to a certain extent. But this hasn't got the pleat, so it's flat. I've seen some which work a bit different, but if you let me know if you're on my Patreon, we can sort of look at, I think we should look at drafting both of them. This one and the sort of where we have more of a drapey pleat, which I really love. Yeah, and have a look if you're interested. Tremaine, she did quite a few different jumpsuits. They're really nice. And she shows you all different angles. And what she said herself, that and you know how I just said, if you want a really fitted one, it doesn't work at all. And she said the same, but basically at the back, you can't have it as fitted because it messes up the whole style. So it's sort of, with jumpsuits, like normally when you're fitting a dress or a pair of trousers or a shirt, you're only working with width and length. With a jumpsuit, you have to consider everything, like torso length, movement. It's sort of much more related because you're joining everything together, so you haven't got lots of options for moving. Like with a top, for example, if you moved up like that, the whole top would just move. But if it's attached to a trouser, you can't. So it's really important to make a 12. But this is sort of a good starting point by sort of just working out how you want to fit it, how it belongs, whether you want to have it one piece like this, and whether you add your center back, whether you actually keep maybe your waist seam at the back so you can do a little bit more fitting. Because of course this whole thing about turning it all in one piece is that you are even more restricted on where you do your little fitting bits. So for a very fitted one, you need to add more seams. But I think great thing is that you can actually play around with it, and you could actually have a style line coming down here if you wanted to. So it becomes a bit more like a men's jacket. So once you sort of work out, I would make a twirl like this, so quite basic. You don't even put the yoke on your first twirl. And then work out what fits, because as Mala Demna just said, you don't want to get a veggie when you're sitting down. So I was surprised how I sort of calculated how much extra height I needed, but I needed more. So try all that out. You don't want a crotch which is too dropped, because that's always uncomfortable as well. So it's working all that out. And then I would actually add draw the wrap on and sort of work it all out after it. But yes, this is sort of my analysis of a 1940s jumpsuit with a little excursion into yokes, which I hope you enjoyed. And I will probably put a little vote up on YouTube, and we can see whether you want to have a look at men's or sort of shirts in general. And I think Astrid said, did you say you have a whole book on men's shirts by Taylor? There's lots. It's quite an amazing subject, and I'm not specialist, but I'm fascinating at it by it. So I'd love to look at it with you at some point. But that's it for me tonight. I hope you enjoyed it and hopefully found it helpful as well. And I hopefully, well, fingers crossed, make my trial for my own jumpsuit, which is not this one, but actually it might be quite nice to adapt it. And I will share it with you hopefully tomorrow how I'm getting on. Anyway, it was lovely to chat to all of you, and I'll see you again soon, hopefully. You on Instagram. I'll be back on Instagram live on Tuesday, or on YouTube. I think I've got a tutorial planned for 2 weeks' time. I'm going to look at some vintage books, just appreciate them. But that's it from me for tonight. And Astrid has got a book, so if she finds it, I will link it with you. I think it's an old one, but it's beautiful. But thank you for watching, Astrid. Lovely to chat to you, and nice to see you, Jan, as well. And have a lovely weekend, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and oh God, I'm tired now. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and Sunday is still to come. Hooray! Oh, and Makita says it's David Page Coffin who's written the shirt book. There you go, the power of the internet. Thank you for that, Makita. And bye-bye, Sharon. And Claire, you're on the case as well. You agree it's David Coffin. So that's fantastic. You're doing my work for me. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye, Claire. Bye, Michelle. Bye, Cheryl as well. And bye, Christelle as well. And bye, Heather. And bye, Omotayo. So lovely to chat to you. Bye-bye.